Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
Sometimes the man who runs from you is the same man who thinks about you every single day. Not in some poetic, movie scene kind of way. More like, he's standing in the kitchen at 1:12 a.m. eating cereal straight from the box because he can't sleep again. Your name flashes through his mind for half a second. He immediately reaches for his phone, then puts it back down like touching it burnt him. And the confusing part is, he probably told you he needed space, acted distant, took longer to reply, maybe even disappeared after things started getting real. So you start wondering if you imagined the whole thing. But people don't usually replay conversations that meant nothing to them. They don't stare at old messages while pretending they're looking for something else. They don't avoid eye contact with emotions they truly escaped. The uncomfortable truth is, some men leave emotionally long before they physically leave. And some leave physically while emotionally staying stuck for months. Part of him wanted closeness. Another part associated closeness with losing control. And honestly, that contradiction ruins people. Because he can miss you deeply and still not know how to stay. I think one of the most damaging things people tell themselves after someone pulls away is, if he really cared, he wouldn't have left. And I understand why people say that. Honestly, I do. Because when somebody goes cold after closeness, when they suddenly become harder to reach, slower to reply, emotionally blurry, it feels personal in the worst possible way. Your brain starts trying to simplify it so you can survive it. He lost feelings. It wasn't real. I imagined the connection. If it mattered to him, he would have stayed consistent. Sometimes that's true, but not always. And I think deep down, some people know that. That's the painful part. Because sometimes the man who leaves is not emotionally detached at all. Sometimes he's overwhelmed. Sometimes he's emotionally unequipped. Sometimes he feels too much and handles it badly. And unfortunately, those two things can look identical from the outside. I remember this one conversation with a friend years ago. He had just stopped talking to a woman he clearly cared about. Not casually cared about. I mean the kind where her mood affected his nervous system for the rest of the day. And yet he disappeared anyway. Not dramatically. Not with cruelty. Just gradual emotional retreat. Longer gaps between texts. Shorter answers. Less warmth in his voice. Acting tired all the time, becoming weirdly formal with someone he used to laugh with naturally. And I remember sitting across from him while he kept insisting he just needed space. But his behavior didn't match someone at peace. His phone was face down on the table the entire night like it was radioactive. Every time it buzzed, his shoulders tensed slightly before he pretended not to notice. At one point, he finally grabbed it, looked at the screen for maybe half a second, then locked it again immediately. I didn't even see the message, but I knew it was her. You can tell when someone is emotionally haunted by the way they try to look emotionally unaffected. That strange over-control, that stiffness, that tiny delay before they say, "I'm good." And the truth is, a lot of men are taught to experience emotional intensity as pressure instead of connection. Nobody says it out loud like that, but you see it everywhere. A relationship starts becoming emotionally real, and suddenly the man who seemed completely confident starts acting inconsistent. Not because he planned to manipulate anyone. Not because he woke up one day and decided to become distant. Sometimes it happens almost unconsciously. The connection deepens. And instead of feeling safe, he starts feeling exposed. That's the word people don't talk about enough. Exposed. Like she can see things he usually keeps hidden under routines, humor, productivity, distraction, control. And at first, that feeling is intoxicating. He likes talking to her too much. He starts checking his phone more. Music sounds different. Driving home at night feels cinematic for no reason. He replays little moments she probably forgot 5 minutes later. The way she looked at him when he admitted something vulnerable accidentally. The way she noticed his mood shift before he even spoke. The way she said you seem tired and somehow it felt less about sleep and more about his entire life. That kind of emotional visibility changes people, especially people who built their identity around never needing anyone. But then something strange happens. The closer he feels emotionally, the more self-conscious he becomes. And this is where people get confused. Because externally, it can start looking like disinterest. Internally, it's often the opposite. He starts overthinking simple interactions, reads texts twice before replying, feels stupid for caring so much, worries about disappointing her, worries about needing her, worries she'll eventually see the parts of him he barely tolerates himself. And instead of moving closer, he starts pulling little pieces of himself away, not always intentionally. Sometimes he doesn't even fully realize he's doing it. It shows up in small human ways first. He takes longer to answer even though he saw the message immediately. He suddenly becomes busy right after emotionally intimate moments. He opens her profile late at night, then exits before watching the story because somehow even that feels too vulnerable. He tells himself, "Don't make this your whole world. Calm down. You're overthinking. Get a grip." Meanwhile, he's already emotionally attached. That's the contradiction nobody really prepares you for. Some men become distant precisely when they start caring deeply. Not because distance feels good, because closeness starts activating fear alongside desire. And if a man has spent most of his life emotionally surviving instead of emotionally processing, he often experiences intimacy as loss of control. I know that sounds dramatic, but watch the behavior closely. A man can spend hours thinking about someone, then ignore their message for 2 days. Not because he forgot, because replying feels emotionally loaded now. Because vulnerability creates pressure inside him he doesn't know how to regulate. And honestly, sometimes he resents the connection for that. That's another ugly truth. Sometimes he misses her and resents her simultaneously. Not because she did something wrong, because she became emotionally important. And importance is terrifying to people who associate attachment with pain, failure, obligation, rejection, or emotional dependence. You see it especially after moments of genuine closeness. After the long conversation at 2 a.m. After the night he almost said too much. After she touched the emotional part of him he usually hides behind sarcasm or calmness. That's often when the withdrawal begins, which feels cruel from the other side, because she's thinking, "We got closer, why does he suddenly feel further away?" And he's sitting alone somewhere trying to calm down emotions he doesn't even fully understand. Maybe he's driving around at night for no reason. Maybe he's at the gym longer than necessary. Maybe he's cleaning his apartment at midnight because silence feels unbearable suddenly. People do that, by the way. They start organizing drawers emotionally. They wipe already clean kitchen counters because their mind is too loud. And the strange thing is he might genuinely convince himself he needs distance. Partially because distance gives him the illusion of emotional control again. But control is not peace. That's the part that takes people years to understand. You can leave someone emotionally and still carry them everywhere. I've seen men go completely silent while secretly replaying one sentence for months. One look, one goodbye, One moment in the car where she reached for his hand and he felt something crack open internally that he immediately tried to suppress. And suppression is exhausting, because feelings do not disappear just because behavior changes. A man can stop texting you and still think about you while standing in line at a gas station. He can unfollow you and still search your name manually 1 a.m. He can tell his friends it's complicated, while privately feeling grief he doesn't know how to admit without feeling weak. And sometimes the saddest part is, he genuinely believes leaving is the more responsible thing to do, especially if he feels emotionally unstable, inadequate, confused, or afraid he'll hurt her eventually. So from the outside, it looks cold, but internally, it can feel more like panic mixed with shame. Why can't I just do this normally? Why do I want closeness and space at the exact same time? Why do I miss her more when I'm away from her? Why did I feel relieved after pulling away and then immediately empty? That emotional whiplash is real. And no, this doesn't excuse hurting people. Some men absolutely avoid accountability by hiding behind confusion. Some know exactly what they're doing. Some enjoy emotional control. But there are also men who are simply emotionally unevolved in painfully human ways. Men who care deeply but only realize the depth of it once distance becomes irreversible. Men who say I need space, then spend the next 3 months emotionally circling the connection in private. Checking, remembering, suppressing, repeating, and maybe the hardest thing to accept is this. A person can love your presence and still not know how to sustain intimacy. Those are not the same skill. Part of him wanted to stay. Another part was already reaching for the exit the moment the feelings became undeniable. And sometimes both parts are real at the exact same time. Most people think the turning point is something dramatic. A confession, a breakup, a huge emotional conversation at midnight. Some movie scene moment where both people suddenly realize, oh no, this is serious. But honestly, a lot of the time, the moment it becomes too real is almost painfully ordinary. That's why it catches him off guard. It happens in moments his brain doesn't register as dangerous until later. Like sitting in traffic together, or hearing her laugh too hard at something stupid he said, or the moment she notices a mood shift he thought he hid perfectly. That one especially, because some men are used to being emotionally invisible while standing directly in front of people, used to functioning, performing, responding correctly, keeping conversations on safe surfaces. And then someone notices something subtle. You got quiet all of a sudden. Simple sentence. But something inside him stiffens immediately. Not outwardly. Outwardly, he shrugs. I'm fine, just tired. But internally there's this strange flash of exposure. Because he was tired. But not physically. And the uncomfortable part is she noticed without him explaining it. That kind of emotional visibility affects people more than they admit, especially men who spent years surviving through emotional compartmentalization. I think people underestimate how intimate it feels to be accurately observed. Not admired, observed. There's a difference. Admiration stays on the surface. Observation reaches under it. And usually the relationship still feels light when this starts happening. That's the strange part. They're still joking, still flirting, still acting normal. Meanwhile, his internal world is becoming progressively less normal. He starts attaching emotional meaning to tiny moments. Moments he would never describe out loud because hearing himself say them would embarrass him. Like remembering the exact way she looked out the passenger window during a red light. Or the fact she always double checks if he ate that day without making it obvious. Or how she says his name differently when she's genuinely worried versus when she's teasing him. These tiny details start living in his head without permission. And he hates that a little. Not because he hates her, because emotional attachment often arrives before emotional readiness. And those two things create chaos together. I remember a guy once telling me the moment everything shifted for him wasn't during intimacy. It was after. They had spent the whole evening together. Nothing dramatic happened. No deep confession. No life-changing conversation. They were just sitting in silence in his apartment after eating takeout. And she fell asleep for maybe 20 minutes with her head against his shoulder. That was it. That was the moment he panicked. Not externally, internally. Because suddenly the situation stopped feeling casual. The room felt different afterward. Too quiet. Too emotionally real. He told me he actually felt irritated after she left. Not at her, at himself. Because her presence lingered after she was gone. The indentation on the couch cushion. Her hair tied left near the sink. The half-finished drink on a table. And he couldn't stop noticing all of it. That's when avoidance quietly begins sometimes. Not after conflict. After tenderness. People don't talk about that enough. Some men can handle desire easier than emotional safety. Desire feels temporary, manageable, contained. Safety is different. Safety makes people lower emotional defenses they've depended on for years. And once somebody starts emotionally relaxing around you, their fears become more visible too. That's why men sometimes become strange right after genuine connection. Not fake connection. Not performative chemistry. Real emotional ease. The kind where he accidentally stops monitoring himself so carefully. Maybe he talks too much one night. Maybe he reveals something personal without planning to. Maybe he laughs in that unguarded way he usually suppresses around people. And then later, you can almost feel him realizing it happened. Like his nervous system catches up afterward. Oh no. She saw too much. I'm getting attached. This could actually hurt me. That realization rarely arrives gracefully. It usually arrives in weird behavioral shifts. Delayed replies. Random emotional distance. Becoming overly logical suddenly. Acting busy. Needing time to think. And the woman on the other side often feels completely blindsided because from her perspective, things were becoming closer. Which they were. That's exactly the problem. I think one of the saddest misunderstandings in relationships is this idea that emotional retreat always means emotional absence. Sometimes retreat happens because the feelings became harder to control. Not healthier. Not deeper. Just harder to contain internally. And honestly, men don't always handle that well. Sometimes they become colder instead of more honest. Sometimes they disappear into routines. Work, gym, video games, friends, anything predictable. Because predictability feels safer than emotional dependency. Especially if he secretly started needing her emotionally before he admitted it to himself. That's another thing people rarely say directly. Some men do not realize how emotionally invested they are until their behavior starts changing around the person. Until they start checking their phone too often. Until they reread conversations. Until they hear a song and instantly think of her face before they can stop themselves. Until they start calming down emotionally just because she texted. Did you make it home? Those tiny moments matter more than grand declarations sometimes. Because they bypass performance. And the body reacts before the ego does. You can watch it happen in real time. He sees her name pop up. His breathing changes slightly. His posture shifts. His attention narrows instantly. Then, just seconds later, he tries to act casual again. It's almost involuntary. And if the connection keeps deepening, eventually another fear enters quietly. Expectation. Because now it matters. Now her disappointment matters. Her opinion matters. Her absence matters. And people who are uncomfortable with vulnerability often start emotionally scrambling once someone gains that level of influence internally. Not because the person became toxic, because attachment itself feels destabilizing, especially for men who build identities around self-containment. You'll notice this especially in emotionally independent men, the ones who pride themselves on not needing anyone, until suddenly one person changes their mood for an entire evening, and now they're irritated at themselves for caring. That irritation creates emotional contradiction. Part of him wants more closeness. Another part immediately starts pulling back to regain emotional control. So he starts negotiating with his own feelings privately. This is moving too fast. No, it isn't. You're overreacting. She's getting too important. She's literally just being kind. Exactly, that's the problem. And none of this gets communicated clearly most of the time. That's what creates so much confusion. Because externally, he might still look composed. Meanwhile, internally, he's replaying tiny moments obsessively. The way she reached for his hand absent-mindedly. The pause before she answered a vulnerable question. The look on her face when she thought he wasn't paying attention. There's always one small memory that gets stuck disproportionately hard. Usually something painfully ordinary. That's what makes it worse. Not dramatic enough to justify the emotional impact. Just human enough to slip past defenses. I knew someone once who couldn't stop replaying a moment where she fixed the collar of his jacket before he left. That's it. No confession. No kiss. No cinematic music. Just that tiny gesture. And he said what bothered him wasn't even the gesture itself. It was how natural it felt. How instinctively intimate it felt. Like his body relaxed around her before his mind approved of it. That loss of emotional control scares people more than they admit. Because now the connection isn't theoretical anymore. It's physical, behavioral, embedded into routine. And once someone starts affecting your internal state that deeply, distance stops feeling simple. Which is why men sometimes start acting strange right when things feel most emotionally promising. Not because the connection is weak, because it suddenly feels strong enough to change them. And honestly, that realization alone has made a lot of men run. One of the most confusing experiences for someone falling in love is this. Everything feels closer. Then suddenly he changes. Not all at once. That's what makes it emotionally disorienting. If somebody becomes cruel immediately, at least your brain can organize the pain quickly. But this kind of shift is slower, harder to name. It happens in fragments. The night before, he was emotionally open, relaxed, present. Then 2 days later, his texts feel strangely formal, shorter. Like somebody quietly turned the emotional lighting down in the room. And the woman on the other side usually feels the difference immediately, almost physically, even if she tries to rationalize it. No, maybe he's just stressed. Maybe work is overwhelming. I'm probably overthinking. But her body already noticed the emotional withdrawal before her mind caught up. Because intimacy changes energy in very specific ways. And when someone suddenly becomes emotionally cautious after closeness, you can feel it in tiny things. The delay before replying, the missing warmth, the reduced eye contact, the way conversations suddenly become practical instead of emotionally fluid. What makes this dynamic so painful is that it often happens directly after moments that felt meaningful, after vulnerability, after affection, after emotional honesty, after sex sometimes, especially after sex, honestly. People romanticize intimacy constantly, but they almost never talk about the emotional confusion that can happen afterward, particularly in men who are emotionally avoidant, emotionally inexperienced, or carrying unresolved shame around closeness. Because sometimes a man leaves intimacy feeling connected, and sometimes he leaves feeling exposed. Those are very different internal experiences. I remember hearing a guy describe this once in a way that stayed with me. He said, "It wasn't that I regretted being close to her. I regretted how much I liked it." That sentence felt painfully honest to me, because that's the contradiction. Some men don't become distant because intimacy meant nothing. They become distant because it meant too much too quickly. And now they're emotionally scrambling to regain balance internally. But from the outside, it just looks like inconsistency, which hurts people deeply, especially women who open emotionally, feel the connection deepen, then suddenly watch the man emotionally drift right after the closeness they thought brought them together. That kind of emotional whiplash can genuinely make somebody question their reality, because now she's replaying everything trying to figure out where the shift happened. Meanwhile, he's probably confused too. Not always consciously, but physically, emotionally, behaviorally. His nervous system changes around her now. That's why some men become strange after intimacy. Not evil, not always manipulative, just dysregulated in ways they don't fully understand. Sometimes he goes quiet because the emotional intensity lingers longer than expected. He gets home after being with her and suddenly the silence in his apartment feels louder. He throws on a show he doesn't even care about just to stop thinking. Checks his phone. Puts it down. Checks it again 3 minutes later. Starts typing something. Deletes it. What would he even say? "Hey, I know we just had this deeply intimate moment, but now I feel emotionally overwhelmed and weirdly vulnerable, and part of me wants reassurance, while another part wants to disappear for a week." Most people don't say that out loud. So instead they say, "Busy day today. Sorry, I fell asleep. My head's just all over the place lately." Half-truths. Emotion translated into logistics. And sometimes he genuinely believes he needs distance, because closeness activated things he normally keeps tightly controlled. Need, attachment, fear, dependency, hope. Hope especially. Hope makes emotionally guarded people act strange, because now there's something to lose. That's why you'll often notice the emotional withdrawal begins right after moments that feel safest. The safe moments are actually what trigger panic sometimes, not conflict. Safety. I know that sounds backwards, but emotionally avoidant people often know how to function inside instability better than they know how to relax inside genuine closeness. Chaos feels familiar. Vulnerability feels dangerous. So after intimacy, he might unconsciously start restoring emotional distance to calm himself down. More time at work, longer gym sessions, suddenly needing space, becoming hyper-focused on responsibilities. And the painful irony is, while he's distancing himself externally, internally he often becomes even more emotionally preoccupied. That's the part nobody sees. He's colder in communication, but thinking about her constantly. He acts detached, but notices every change in her tone. He says less while feeling more. And honestly, sometimes this creates shame, because now he feels emotionally affected in ways he cannot control gracefully. Maybe he wakes up expecting relief after pulling away, but instead he feels restless, irritable, emotionally unfinished. So now he becomes even more avoidant because the situation feels bigger than he intended. That's another hidden truth. Some men accidentally fall emotionally deeper than they planned to. And instead of adapting maturely, they start emotionally malfunctioning. Not intentionally, just humanly. I remember someone describing how after spending an entire weekend with a woman he genuinely cared about, he suddenly stopped texting her normally afterward. Not because he lost interest, because the intimacy made the relationship feel real in a way he could no longer mentally control. He said something like, "It stopped feeling hypothetical." That line stayed with me because I think that's exactly what happens sometimes. Before intimacy, connection can still feel somewhat abstract, flexible, and emotionally manageable. But after closeness becomes embodied, after sleeping next to someone, after hearing them breathe in the dark, after learning their small routines, after feeling emotionally safe beside them for even a few hours, the emotional stakes change. Now her absence feels different. Now silence feels louder. Now his emotions have consequences he can physically feel. And some men are deeply unequipped for that transition, especially men who were praised their whole lives for emotional self-control. Because intimacy is not controlled. Real intimacy is messy. It exposes insecurity, immaturity, fear, neediness, contradiction, and sometimes men experience that exposure almost like ego death. Not in a dramatic spiritual sense, just psychologically. The version of himself that felt independent suddenly feels emotionally affected by another human being. That can create resistance internally, especially if he associates emotional dependence with weakness. So he starts overcorrecting, acting less interested than he is, taking longer to respond on purpose, trying to regain emotional leverage internally, not always consciously manipulative, sometimes almost embarrassingly subconscious, like watching himself become emotionally unavailable in real time while part of him quietly hates that he's doing it. That's the painful split. One part wants to move closer. Another part starts calculating escape routes. And sometimes both parts are active simultaneously. You can hear it in the internal dialogue. She matters to me. This is getting dangerous. Dangerous. You know what I mean. No, actually I don't. She could hurt me. She's literally just caring about you. Exactly. That last part matters more than people realize. Because care itself can become emotionally destabilizing for someone unaccustomed to receiving it consistently, especially if he's spent years emotionally surviving through detachment. Then, suddenly someone enters his life who softens him without trying, who notices him, calms him, gets through his emotional defenses naturally. That sounds beautiful in theory, until he realizes he now emotionally anticipates her presence. That realization alone can trigger withdrawal, because now she has influence. Now she can disappoint him, leave him, see him fully, need things from him emotionally. And instead of communicating those fears honestly, many men unconsciously create distance first. Not because they don't care, because they care and don't know how to carry it properly. That doesn't make the withdrawal harmless. It still hurts. It still confuses people. It still creates emotional damage when someone suddenly becomes colder after intimacy instead of more emotionally transparent. But understanding the psychology behind it matters. Because not every emotionally distant man is emotionally empty. Sometimes he's overwhelmed by the exact feelings he cannot express correctly. Sometimes he misses her while actively ignoring her. Sometimes he stares at her message for 20 minutes before answering with, "Yeah, haha." And sometimes the coldness people experience after intimacy is actually emotional panic wearing a calm face. There's a specific kind of loneliness that happens when someone is clearly affected by you, but spends all their energy trying not to show it. Not because they're mysterious, not because they're emotionally powerful, usually because they're scared of what happens if they stop managing themselves for even 1 second. And honestly, a lot of men become performers once feelings get too real. Not fake people, just emotionally defensive ones. You can almost watch the performance building in real time. The forced casualness, the controlled tone, the carefully delayed responses, the sudden obsession with appearing unaffected, especially after emotional intimacy, especially after moments where she saw something genuine in him. Because once he realizes, she can affect me emotionally, he often starts trying to regain control of the situation internally. That's when the strange behaviors begin. Not dramatic behaviors, quiet ones. He watches her stories immediately, but doesn't reply to her message. He types long responses, then deletes them and sends, "Ha He goes unusually quiet after deep conversations. He suddenly becomes hard to read after weeks of emotional openness. And the woman on the other side feels herself slowly becoming emotionally disoriented, trying to interpret contradictions. Because his behavior says, "Stay back," but his attention says, "I'm still here." That inconsistency can make people feel crazy, especially because avoidant behavior rarely looks dramatic from the outside. Most of the time it looks painfully ordinary. A delayed reply, a shorter conversation, less initiation, a shift in emotional tone, tiny changes. But human beings are incredibly sensitive to emotional rhythm, especially when attachment is involved. You notice when someone who used to text good night suddenly stops. You notice when their warmth becomes intermittent. You notice when conversations start feeling emotionally managed instead of natural. And honestly, he notices too. That's part of the tragedy. People assume emotionally avoidant men are unaware of their behavior all the time. Sometimes they are painfully aware. Sometimes he's staring at the screen knowing his distance is hurting her, while simultaneously feeling incapable of showing up differently in that moment. That internal split creates a very specific kind of shame, because part of him knows, this isn't who I want to be, but another part feels emotionally trapped. So instead of honesty, he performs stability. "I'm just busy. I've had a lot on my mind. I'm not really on my phone lately." Meanwhile, he checked her profile 6 times that day. That's the thing about emotional suppression. It leaks everywhere. A man trying not to care often becomes obsessed with appearing like he doesn't care. Which means, ironically, he's still emotionally orbiting the connection constantly. I remember someone once admitting that after pulling away emotionally from a woman he deeply cared about, he developed this weird ritual every night. He'd open their message thread, scroll up, read old conversations for maybe 10 minutes, then lock his phone without replying to the new message sitting at the bottom. Every single night. That behavior sounds irrational because it is irrational. Human emotion is irrational sometimes, especially when intimacy collides with fear. And social media has made this dynamic even stranger, because now emotional avoidance has digital body language. Watching stories instantly, liking old photos accidentally, going silent for days while still quietly monitoring someone's existence. Tiny behaviors that scream, "I'm emotionally involved," while verbally pretending neutrality. And honestly, some men hate themselves while doing it. That's the uncomfortable part nobody glamorizes. Avoidance doesn't always feel empowering internally. Sometimes it feels pathetic, immature, lonely, like sitting in your apartment pretending you want space while secretly hoping she notices your silence. Not because you want to manipulate her necessarily, because part of you wants proof she still cares enough to reach through the distance you created. That contradiction is painfully human. I need space. Why did she stop trying? I'm overwhelmed. Why does her silence suddenly hurt? I wanted distance. No, I wanted relief. That's different. That distinction matters. Distance and relief are not the same thing. A lot of emotionally avoidant behavior is actually an attempt to regulate internal overwhelm, not an actual desire to disconnect permanently. But unfortunately, from the outside, the impact can feel identical. And when men don't understand their own emotional processes clearly, they often default to performance. The performance of calm, the performance of detachment, the performance of certainty. Meanwhile, internally, chaos, especially late at night. That's usually when the performance weakens. Because distractions disappear, there's something brutally honest about nighttime emotions. The apartment gets quieter. The ego gets tired. The emotional defenses lose energy. That's when he starts replaying things. The way she looked at him before leaving the car. The moment she asked if he was okay, and he lied automatically. The expression on her face when she realized he was emotionally pulling away. Sometimes regret enters softly like that. Not dramatic guilt. Just this slow awareness. She was trying to get closer while I was emotionally retreating. And instead of sitting with that discomfort honestly, many men distract themselves again. Phone, work, gym, random conversations, video games, anything loud enough to interrupt emotional self-awareness. People think avoidance always looks cold. Sometimes it looks restless, hyperactive, over-social, overproductive, because stillness makes the feelings harder to outrun. I knew someone who started deep cleaning his apartment every time he missed her. Not consciously at first. He'd feel emotionally overwhelmed, then suddenly start organizing kitchen cabinets at midnight, wiping counters that were already clean, folding clothes slowly while replaying old conversations in his head. The body always finds somewhere to put unresolved emotion, even when the mouth says, "I'm fine." Especially then, that phrase alone has probably hidden more emotional confusion than almost any sentence in modern relationships. I'm fine. Sometimes what it really means is, I don't understand what's happening inside me. I don't know why closeness makes me panic. I miss you, but talking to you feels emotionally intense right now. I'm scared if I need you too much, I'll lose myself. I care more than I plan to. I don't know how to carry that maturely. But most people never learned how to say those things out loud. So they shrink into silence instead. Or worse, they become emotionally vague. And emotional vagueness is one of the most painful experiences for someone trying to love honestly. Because uncertainty exhausts the nervous system. You start analyzing tiny changes. The punctuation in texts, response times, tone shifts, the difference between good night and night. And what makes it harder is that avoidant men often still show emotional attachment indirectly, not consistently enough to create safety, but enough to prevent emotional closure. He remembers details, still checks in occasionally, responds emotionally when she pulls away, gets weirdly affected when she stops giving attention. That's what creates the push-pull dynamic people become addicted to. Not because inconsistency feels good, because intermittent warmth creates emotional confusion powerful enough to mimic obsession. And deep down, he may be confused too. Part of him genuinely wants connection. Another part associates connection with emotional risk. So he keeps trying to balance intimacy and emotional self-protection simultaneously, which usually fails. Because people can feel when affection is being filtered through fear. You hear it in the hesitation, feel it in the pauses, notice it in the emotional half steps. And honestly, sometimes the saddest moments are the smallest ones. like when he sees her name appear on his phone and smiles automatically, then deliberately waits an hour before responding because he's trying not to seem emotionally invested. That's such a painfully human thing to do. Not wise, not healthy, not cruel either. Just emotionally immature in a very ordinary way. Trying to maintain dignity while quietly losing emotional balance internally. And eventually the performance becomes exhausting. Because pretending not to care requires constant emotional management. Monitoring tone. Monitoring response speed. Monitoring vulnerability. Monitoring attachment. Meanwhile, the feelings underneath remain unresolved. That's why emotionally avoidant men often look calm externally while internally living in emotional contradiction. I want her. I need distance. I miss her. I can't do this. Why can't I stop thinking about her? Why does talking to her calm me down and overwhelm me at the same time? No clean answer. Just emotional noise. And sometimes the performance of I'm fine lasts so long. Even he forgets where the act ends and the truth begins. One of the strangest things about emotional attachment is that the mind can deny it long after the body already knows the truth. That's why some men can say, I'm over it, while physically reorganizing their entire life around avoiding reminders of one person. The body always tells on us eventually, not dramatically either, quietly, in habits, in tension, in sleeplessness, in tiny involuntary reactions that happen before pride has time to intervene. And honestly, this is usually the phase where things become most confusing internally for him. Because distance was supposed to create relief. That was the whole point. More space, less emotional intensity, less vulnerability, less dependence. But instead, he starts carrying her everywhere mentally, not in some cinematic romance way, more like psychological residue. She appears in ordinary moments without permission. A phrase she used, a song he pretended not to care about, a certain street at night, the smell of laundry detergent that suddenly makes his chest feel tight for reasons he can't logically explain. And these moments irritate him sometimes, because they expose the fact that emotional detachment isn't happening nearly as cleanly as he planned. I remember hearing someone say, I thought if I stopped talking to her, my feelings would become quieter. Instead, everything became louder. That's usually the part people don't anticipate. Silence amplifies unresolved emotion, especially when the connection ended emotionally unfinished. Because the nervous system doesn't care about the story the ego is trying to tell. The ego says, you needed space. The body says, then why are you checking your phone every 6 minutes? The ego says, you're fine. The body says, then why haven't you slept properly in 2 weeks? That internal conflict creates exhaustion, and it starts showing up in small physical ways. Restlessness, jaw tension, random emotional crushes, difficulty concentrating, staring at the same text message for 20 minutes without answering, driving longer routes home for no real reason except the movement temporarily quiets the mind. Night drives become important for people like this. There's something about being alone in a car at night that removes emotional distractions. The city gets quieter. The performance softens. Thoughts become harder to outrun. And suddenly he's replaying tiny moments again. Not the dramatic ones usually. The small ones. The way she looked half asleep in the passenger seat. The sound of her laughing at something genuinely stupid. The way she reached for his hand instinctively during a conversation without realizing she was doing it. Memory becomes sensory at that point, not intellectual. That's why emotionally avoidant men often struggle after separation more than they expected. Because intellectually, distance made sense. Emotionally, physiologically, maybe not. The body had already started associating her with regulation, calm, safety, relief, presence, and once someone becomes part of your emotional regulation system, losing access to them affects the nervous system in ways pride cannot override immediately. That's why some men become emotionally weird after pulling away. Not because they're peacefully detached, because their body is still adapting to the absence while their ego is trying to maintain control. So now he's caught in contradiction again, missing her while refusing to reach out, thinking about her constantly while pretending to move on, feeling emotional relief and grief simultaneously. That combination is brutal, honestly, because part of him genuinely believes distance is necessary, and another part feels emotionally stranded inside the silence he created. I think people underestimate how physically emotional suppression affects the body, especially men who rarely verbalize what they feel. Emotion doesn't disappear just because it's unspoken. It relocates into insomnia, into irritability, into compulsive distraction, into emotional numbness, into overworking, into random bursts of anger that aren't really about anger. Sometimes the body starts grieving before the mind fully admits loss. That's why you'll see emotionally avoidant men suddenly become hyperproductive after emotional separation, working constantly, going to the gym excessively, filling every empty second with stimulation, because stillness becomes dangerous. Stillness allows memory to surface, and memory is deeply physical. A certain time of night, a restaurant, a hoodie she left behind accidentally. Suddenly, his entire emotional state shifts before he even consciously understands why. That's the thing about attachment. The body remembers patterns long after communication stops. I knew someone who couldn't walk through the grocery store normally for months after our relationship ended. Not because of dramatic heartbreak scenes, because she used to tease him for always buying the same cereal. That's it. Now, every time he passed that aisle, his chest tightened unexpectedly. Embarrassingly small trigger, but emotionally real. And he hated that it still affected him. That's another hidden layer here. Many men feel ashamed of how deeply they're impacted emotionally, especially if they were the one who created the distance. Because now they feel trapped inside consequences they initiated themselves. And the ego struggles with that. You wanted this. Then why do you feel miserable? You needed freedom. Then why does everything feel empty now? There's no clean answer. Just emotional contradiction again. And honestly, this is where a lot of men become emotionally harder on the outside. Because internally things feel softer than they're comfortable admitting. So externally they overcorrect, more detached, more casual, more emotionally unavailable. Meanwhile, internally, one memory can destabilize the entire day. A mutual friend mentioning her name casually, seeing a car that looks like hers, hearing someone laugh with the same cadence. The body reacts instantly, before logic, before pride, before emotional suppression. That involuntary reaction is important because it reveals something most avoidant people try very hard not to admit. The connection mattered more than they wanted it to. And sometimes the body exposes this in almost humiliating ways. Like opening her social media automatically without consciously deciding to. Or instinctively reaching for the phone after something funny happens because she's still the person his brain wants to share things with first. That habit is painful, especially when the relationship has already emotionally fractured, because now instinct and reality no longer match. His body still moves toward connection while his mind insists on distance. That disconnect creates emotional fatigue, and eventually, emotional fatigue becomes emotional leakage. That's when the random late-night messages happen. The just checking in texts. The unnecessary reactions to stories. The emotionally vague conversations started for no real reason. Not always because he has clarity. Sometimes because his nervous system misses contact before his pride can stop him. Then afterward he retreats again. Because contact brings temporary relief, followed by emotional exposure. And exposure reactivates the original fear. So now the cycle repeats. Reach, retreat, miss, suppress, repeat. Honestly, it can become exhausting for both people, especially because the emotional truth underneath is often embarrassingly simple. He misses her, not abstractly, not spiritually, not poetically, physically. He misses her presence in routine, the way the room felt less tense when she was there, the way conversations flowed easier, the way his body relaxed around her before fear complicated everything. And unfortunately, many men only fully recognize emotional safety after they lose consistent access to it. That realization usually arrives quietly, not during dramatic breakdowns, more often during painfully ordinary moments. Standing in the kitchen, folding laundry, driving home, lying awake at 13 a.m. staring at the ceiling. That's when the truth slips through sometimes. Nut. I made a mistake. Something softer, harder to defend against. I still think about her every day. And maybe the most painful part is, sometimes he still says nothing afterward. Because now there's another fear underneath the original one. Not just, what if I get hurt? Now it's, what if it's too late? So instead he carries the feeling privately, quietly, like emotional static living underneath daily life. And the body keeps remembering, even while the ego keeps pretending to forget. I think people expect heartbreak to feel dramatic all the time. Like crying on the floor, like sad music in the rain, like some huge emotional collapse nobody can ignore. But honestly, a lot of grief feels embarrassingly mundane, especially for men, especially for emotionally avoidant men, because the missing usually doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks slowly into ordinary life, into routines, into silence, into the tiny spaces where another person used to exist without effort. And that's usually when it starts hitting him the hardest. Not during the breakup conversation, not immediately after distance, not even during the initial silence sometimes, but later, when life becomes normal again. That's when the absence becomes undeniable, because now there's no emotional adrenaline left, no conflict, no texting spiral, no emotional chaos to distract him, just routine. And routine is where attachment reveals itself most honestly. He notices it while grocery shopping. That sounds small, but it's real. He walks past something she liked automatically. His hand almost reaches for it out of habit. Then halfway through the motion, his brain catches up. Oh, right. That tiny moment ruins the next 20 minutes emotionally. Not visibly. Nobody around him notices. He still grabs his basket, still walks normally, still answers the cashier politely. But internally something collapsed for a second. Because grief often looks exactly like that. A body continuing routine while emotionally tripping over absence. And honestly, the hardest part for avoidant men is that these moments bypass control. That's why they're so unsettling. He can avoid conversations, avoid vulnerability, avoid reaching out. But he cannot fully control what his nervous system associates with her now. The passenger seat becomes emotionally loud. That's a real thing, especially at night. There's something about an empty passenger seat after attachment that feels weirdly personal. He's driving home from work, music playing softly, one hand on the wheel, and suddenly he remembers her sitting there. The way she adjusted the air conditioning without asking. The way she tucked one leg underneath herself in the seat. The way she absent-mindedly touched his arm while talking. Tiny things. Nothing dramatic enough to justify how much it hurts afterward. That's what makes grief feel so irrational sometimes. The pain doesn't come from grand memories. It comes from ordinary intimacy. And ordinary intimacy is harder to replace than people realize. Anybody can experience excitement, chemistry, novelty, but familiarity, the small unconscious rhythms to people build together, that's different. That gets wired into the body quietly. So now he's alone doing ordinary things and realizing how emotionally present she had become inside his routines. And this realization often arrives with resistance, because part of him still wants to maintain emotional distance psychologically. So he argues with himself internally. You're romanticizing it. No, you miss her. You just miss attention. Then why does everything remind you of her specifically? Silence after that. Because that question gets harder to escape over time. Why her? Why does her absence feel different from everyone else's? That's usually when avoidance starts cracking a little. Not outwardly maybe, but internally. Because now he's confronting something uncomfortable. He didn't just lose excitement. He lost emotional familiarity. And familiarity creates deeper attachment than many emotionally guarded men are prepared for. Especially when they didn't fully appreciate it while it was happening. That's another painful truth. Sometimes men only realize how emotionally safe someone made them feel after the connection disappears. Not because they're evil, because emotional safety often feels invisible while it's present. You only notice it fully when your nervous system suddenly loses access to it. Then ordinary life starts feeling subtly harder. Food tastes flatter. Home feels quieter. Conversations feel less engaging. Even weekends feel strangely empty. And instead of recognizing this as grief directly, many men try to outmaneuver the feeling. More distractions. More work. More socializing. More stimulation. But grief follows people into noise. Especially unresolved grief. That's why emotionally avoidant men often become strangely restless after losing someone meaningful. Not because they want freedom. Because freedom without emotional connection can become emotionally sterile very quickly. And the body notices. I remember someone describing how he kept reaching for his phone during random moments throughout the day. Not consciously to text her. Just instinctively. Something funny would happen. Something stressful. Something interesting. And before he even thought about it fully, his brain would move toward her. Then reality interrupted the impulse. She's not really here anymore. That adjustment period is brutal. Especially because attachment habits are physical before they're logical. His body still expects access to her emotionally. That expectation doesn't disappear overnight just because communication changed. Which is why the missing becomes embedded into ordinary moments first. Not dramatic longing, micro-longing, tiny emotional aches all day long. Walking past a restaurant, hearing a phrase she used constantly, seeing someone wearing perfume that smells vaguely similar. And sometimes the reaction is immediate. A stomach drop, chest tightness, a sudden emotional heaviness that appears out of nowhere. That's the body remembering before the mind has time to suppress it. And honestly, some men become emotionally colder externally during this phase, because internally they feel too emotionally open already. That contradiction matters. People assume missing someone automatically creates emotional honesty. Not always. Sometimes it creates defensiveness, because now he has to confront the fact that the distance didn't solve what he thought it would solve. He still thinks about her, still misses her, still feels emotionally connected in ways he cannot fully control. And for emotionally avoidant people, lack of control often creates more withdrawal first, not less. So instead of reaching out immediately, he watches. Quietly, he checks her social media, notices changes in her tone, pays attention to whether she seems happier without him. And every observation affects him more than he wants it to, especially when she starts pulling her energy back genuinely. That's usually when panic enters softly. Not loud panic, quiet panic. The kind that looks like staring at her profile picture for too long, or reading old conversations late at night, or feeling irrationally emotional after hearing she went out with friends and looked happy. Because now another uncomfortable possibility appears. Maybe she's learning how to live without him, and suddenly the emotional distance he created doesn't feel powerful anymore. It feels real. That realization hits hard, especially for men who unconsciously assumed the emotional connection would remain available indefinitely in the background. And honestly, this is where regret often begins maturing emotionally. Not because he suddenly gains perfect clarity, but because ordinary life keeps proving her importance in ways he cannot intellectually dismiss anymore. He misses the tiny things too specifically now. The exact way she said drive safe. The way she listened when he talked about something stupid and overly detailed. The comfort of her presence during silence. Silence matters more than people realize. Anyone can exist beside you during excitement. But comfortable silence, that's intimacy. That's emotional trust embodied physically. And once someone becomes part of your peaceful silence, their absence becomes loud. That's why nighttime becomes difficult for avoidant men after emotional separation. The distractions fade. The routines end. The apartment gets still. And suddenly, he feels the full emotional weight of who is no longer there. No text coming in. No voice in the background. No shared existence woven into the evening anymore. Just him. And all the emotions he delayed feeling properly. Sometimes he tries to numb this by staying awake too long, scrolling endlessly, watching random videos, falling asleep with the TV on. Anything to avoid that final quiet moment before sleep where the truth usually appears. The truth being, he misses her in ways pride cannot fully suppress anymore. Not abstractly, practically, domestically, emotionally. He misses the life that started forming around her presence. And maybe the saddest part is, the ordinary moments keep reminding him long after he stops admitting it out loud. I don't think people talk enough about the shame that comes after emotional avoidance. Not guilt exactly. Shame is quieter than guilt. Guilt says, I hurt someone. Shame says, what does it say about me that I hurt someone while also loving them? That question ruins a lot of people internally, especially men who genuinely cared but handled the connection badly. Because eventually the emotional fog clears just enough for him to see the contradiction. He missed her while ignoring her, wanted reassurance while acting distant, checked her profile obsessively while pretending not to care, felt jealous while insisting he needed space. And once he starts recognizing those contradictions clearly, it becomes harder to maintain the image of himself he was emotionally hiding behind. That's the uncomfortable phase. The phase where avoidance stops feeling protective and starts feeling embarrassing. Because now he sees the emotional truth underneath his behavior. Not all at once maybe, but in flashes. Like realizing he knows the exact time she usually posts online. Realizing he still listens for her notifications out of habit. realizing he rereads conversations from months ago while telling his friends he's moved on. That kind of self-awareness can feel humiliating for emotionally guarded men, especially men who built their identity around appearing composed. Because now his behavior no longer matches the story he told himself. I just needed distance. Okay, then why are you emotionally spiraling? Because she stopped viewing your stories. That's the kind of thought that starts haunting him privately. And honestly, this is usually where emotional immaturity becomes painfully visible. Not in dramatic ways. In small, pathetic ways. Human ways. Like opening her profile every night before bed without interacting. Or posting things partially hoping she'll notice. Or feeling irrationally disappointed when she doesn't. That emotional contradiction creates deep internal discomfort because part of him knows. You created this distance, which means he can't fully position himself as the victim emotionally. And that realization creates shame fast. Because now he has to sit with another painful truth. Sometimes he wanted emotional closeness without emotional responsibility. That's hard to admit, especially for men who genuinely believe they were protecting themselves. Because eventually self-protection starts looking suspiciously similar to self-sabotage. And deep down he knows it. I remember someone admitting that after emotionally pulling away from a woman he loved, he became obsessed with proving he was fine. Posting more, going out more, acting more detached publicly. Meanwhile, privately, he was checking whether she watched his stories within minutes. That's such a painfully human thing. Trying to maintain emotional dignity while quietly falling apart underneath. And honestly, a lot of avoidant behavior is driven by shame long before people recognize it. Not just fear of intimacy. Fear of being seen emotionally struggling. Fear of needing someone visibly. Fear of admitting, I pushed away the person I wanted closest. Because once that truth lands fully, it becomes difficult to avoid yourself anymore. And men are often deeply unequipped emotionally for that kind of self-confrontation, especially if vulnerability was historically associated with weakness, rejection, humiliation, or loss of control. So instead of admitting the depth of the regret directly, he circles it indirectly, through observation, through nostalgia, through emotional lurking. That's why emotionally avoidant men often become hyper-aware of the person they distance themselves from. Not because they're detached, because unresolved attachment creates constant background emotional monitoring. He notices everything now. Changes in her energy, whether she seems happier, whether she's pulling away emotionally, whether someone else appears in the picture. And every observation affects him more than he expected, especially if she genuinely begins moving on. That's when shame can turn into panic, because now the emotional consequences feel irreversible, not theoretical anymore. Real. I think people imagine regret as this dramatic emotional revelation. Usually it's quieter, more awkward. Like sitting alone staring at an old photo longer than intended. Or hearing someone mention her casually and feeling your stomach drop before your face stays neutral. Or typing, I miss you, then deleting it because you suddenly feel ridiculous. That last one happens more than people think. The unsent messages alone could probably fill entire relationships, especially from emotionally avoidant men. Because internally they often feel more than they can comfortably express externally. So now there's this constant emotional traffic jam happening inside him. Reach out. Don't reach out. She deserves clarity. You already messed this up. What if she ignores you? What if she answers? What if it's too late? What if it isn't? Round and round. And while this is happening, his behavior can still look emotionally detached externally. That's what makes these situations so psychologically confusing for both people. The woman experiences silence and assumes indifference. Meanwhile, he's privately replaying her last vulnerable conversation in his head while brushing his teeth at midnight. But shame keeps him frozen. Because shame doesn't just fear rejection, it fears exposure. And reaching out means risking exposure. Now he has to admit, you mattered. I cared. I was affected. I handled it badly. That level of emotional honesty can feel terrifying for someone who spent most of the relationship emotionally managing appearances. Especially because he may genuinely hate parts of his own behavior now. The inconsistency, the withdrawal, the emotional have-presence. That's another thing people rarely admit. Sometimes avoidant men judge themselves harshly after the connection weakens. Not publicly, privately, because now they can see moments where she was trying to love them while they were emotionally retreating in real time. That realization hurts, especially when memory becomes clearer after distance. Funny how that happens. While inside the relationship, he felt overwhelmed, confused, emotionally defensive. Then, after separation, clarity arrives too late. Now, he understands the softness in her behavior better. The patience, the emotional bids for connection he dismissed or avoided. And unfortunately, late understanding creates a very specific kind of grief. Because now he's grieving not only her, but the version of himself that failed to meet the moment properly. That's heavy, especially for emotionally avoidant men who secretly wanted love desperately while simultaneously resisting it. That contradiction creates deep shame internally. I wanted her. Then why did you push her away? I don't know. That's not true. I was scared. Of what? That she'd matter too much. That's usually the real answer underneath everything. Not that he felt nothing. That he felt too much without the emotional tools to carry it maturely. But by the time he understands that clearly, damage has often already happened. Trust weakened. Connection fractured. Emotional exhaustion built up on both sides. And now, reaching out feels emotionally dangerous for different reasons. Not because intimacy feels scary anymore. Because accountability does. Because now, he has to face the possibility that she suffered while he was busy trying to regulate his own fear. That realization can humble people deeply, or make them retreat even harder. Honestly, both happen. Some men finally become emotionally honest. Others disappear further into pride because shame becomes unbearable. And pride is often just shame wearing armor. That's why some men become colder externally exactly when regret is deepest internally. Not because they stop caring, because caring now comes attached to self-disappointment. So instead of vulnerability, they choose silence again, even while missing her constantly. Even while noticing her absence everywhere. Even while secretly hoping she somehow still understands them despite everything. That hope is painful too. Because part of him wants emotional forgiveness without having to fully expose the messy truth underneath his behavior. But real intimacy eventually demands emotional honesty. And emotional honesty means admitting things that damage the ego. Things like, I acted distant because I was overwhelmed. I wanted you to chase me while I pulled away. I missed you while pretending not to. I kept checking if you still cared. I was scared of needing you. I think I realized what you meant to me too late. Those truths sound simple spoken out loud. But internally, for emotionally avoidant men, they can feel almost unbearable to admit. Because now the performance is collapsing, and underneath the performance is just a human being, missing someone he taught himself to live without before he was emotionally ready to lose her. I think one of the hardest things to explain about emotionally avoidant men is this. A lot of them are not lying when they say they want closeness. And they're not lying when they pull away either. That's what makes the whole thing so emotionally destructive. Both impulses are real. The desire for intimacy, the fear of intimacy, existing in the same person, sometimes in the same hour. And if you've never experienced that internal split before, the behavior can look manipulative from the outside. Sometimes it is manipulative, to be fair, but sometimes it's something messier, less intentional, more psychologically fragmented, like watching somebody move toward love while simultaneously bracing for impact. That contradiction exhausts people internally, especially men who were never taught how to emotionally integrate vulnerability safely. So instead, they split themselves. One part moves closer. The other part immediately starts calculating how to escape if the closeness becomes too emotionally overwhelming. You can actually see this happen in real time if you pay attention closely enough. He opens up emotionally one night, then becomes distant the next day. He initiates intimacy, then suddenly needs space afterward. He tells her he misses her, then disappears emotionally after she responds warmly. And from her perspective, it feels insane, because she keeps asking herself, which version of him is real? Usually both. That's the painful answer. The emotionally open version is real. The emotionally terrified version is real too. And these two internal states often don't communicate well with each other. That's why avoidant behavior can feel so inconsistent. Because internally, he's inconsistent with himself. One part of him deeply craves emotional closeness. Not casually either. Deeply. The kind of closeness where someone understands his moods before he explains them. Where silence feels safe. Where he doesn't have to perform masculinity constantly. Where he can soften without feeling weak. A lot of emotionally guarded men secretly crave that more than anyone realizes. But then another part enters. Usually quietly. And this part asks different questions. What if she leaves? What if she sees the parts of you barely tolerate yourself? What if you become dependent? What if you lose control? What if she matters more than you can emotionally survive? That last fear lives underneath a lot of avoidance. Not fear of love itself, fear of the emotional vulnerability love creates. So now the internal conversation starts happening. And honestly, it's rarely graceful. It sounds more like exhaustion, more like someone arguing with themselves at 1:00 a.m. in a dark room. You should text her. No, you miss her. That's exactly the problem. She cares about you. I know. Then why are you acting like this? I don't know how to calm down around it. That sentence matters. I don't know how to calm down around it. Because emotionally avoidant men are often not avoiding feelings entirely. They're avoiding emotional dysregulation, the loss of internal control, the emotional dependency, the unpredictability of attachment. And unfortunately, the closer the connection becomes, the louder these fears get, which creates this awful push-pull dynamic. Come here. No, too close. Stay. Wait, back up. I miss you. I need space. And the woman on the receiving end experiences emotional whiplash trying to keep up with shifting emotional weather, especially because the transitions can happen fast. One deeply intimate conversation can suddenly be followed by emotional distance that makes no sense logically. And honestly, it often doesn't make sense logically to him either. That's another thing people misunderstand. Avoidant behavior is not always emotionally calculated. Sometimes it's reactive, nervous system level reactive. His body feels emotionally overloaded, so distance suddenly feels necessary. Then once distance happens, loneliness activates. So now closeness feels necessary again. Round and round. That cycle can continue for years if someone never develops emotional awareness around it. And the tragic part is, while he's trying to protect himself from emotional overwhelm, he often creates the exact abandonment dynamic he fears most. That realization usually comes later. Too late sometimes. I remember someone describing this internal split in a brutally honest way once. He said, being close to her felt peaceful and terrifying at the exact same time. That sentence stayed with me because it explains something most people struggle to articulate. Sometimes emotional safety itself becomes activating for people who are unfamiliar with consistent intimacy, because now there's something valuable enough to lose. And once emotional attachment becomes real, the internal pressure increases. Now her mood matters. Her distance matters. Her disappointment matters. Suddenly another human being has emotional influence internally. That's beautiful in healthy relationships. But for emotionally avoidant people, influence can feel dangerous. Not because the other person is dangerous, because vulnerability is. So the internal split deepens. Part of him wants to surrender emotionally. Another part monitors everything carefully, trying to prevent emotional exposure. That monitoring becomes exhausting. Monitoring tone, monitoring attachment, monitoring response times, monitoring emotional neediness, trying to appear calm while internally spiraling. That's why avoidant men often look emotionally restrained externally while internally feeling chaotic. And honestly, sometimes they resent the connection for causing that chaos. Not because they resent her specifically, because emotional attachment disrupted the illusion of self-sufficiency they built their identity around. Now suddenly they care, need, miss, worry, and needing someone emotionally can feel humiliating for people taught to associate emotional independence with strength, especially men. So now pride enters the dynamic too. Pride says, don't chase, don't look desperate, don't give her too much power emotionally. Meanwhile, attachment says, call her. You feel calmer when she's around. You miss her voice. You want her here. That internal war becomes visible behavior eventually. You see it in the hesitation. He starts a vulnerable conversation, then jokes immediately afterward to soften it. He reaches out emotionally, then pulls back once he feels emotionally exposed. He gives affection, then becomes distant because the affection made him feel emotionally transparent. It's like watching someone touch fire carefully, not because they hate warmth, because they're scared of getting burned by needing it. And honestly, one of the saddest parts of this dynamic is how self-aware some men actually are during it. People assume avoidant men are oblivious. Some are painfully conscious. Painfully, they know they're sending mixed signals. Know they're confusing her. Know they're creating instability. And yet internally, they still feel emotionally trapped between opposite needs: connection and protection, intimacy and control, attachment and escape. That split creates paralysis, because no choice feels emotionally safe anymore. If he moves closer, vulnerability increases. If he pulls away, grief increases. So instead he hovers emotionally in between, half present, half withdrawn, enough closeness to feel connected, enough distance to feel protected. But eventually that middle ground collapses, because real intimacy cannot survive indefinite emotional ambivalence. At some point someone gets exhausted, usually her first. And honestly, when she finally begins emotionally detaching for real, that's often when the internal split inside him becomes loudest. Because now another fear appears underneath all the others. What if I pushed away the one person I actually wanted to stay? That question can haunt someone for years. especially emotionally avoidant men. Because deep down, many of them were never actually running from love. They were running from the emotional exposure love required from them. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't fully understand the difference until this silence becomes permanent. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about emotionally avoidant men is this idea that they're always confused. Like they have no idea what they're feeling. No awareness. No understanding of the damage they caused. And honestly, sometimes that's true in the beginning. Sometimes emotional avoidance creates so much internal noise that clarity gets buried under fear, pride, defensiveness, distraction. But eventually, for a lot of men, the confusion fades. And what replaces it is worse. Clarity. Quiet, humiliating clarity. The kind that arrives too late to feel useful. Because now he sees the relationship differently. Not through panic. Not through emotional overwhelm. Not through the desperate need to regain control. Just reality. And reality is hard to negotiate with once emotional adrenaline disappears. Especially when she stops reaching for him. That changes everything. People don't realize how much emotional avoidance survives off assumption. The assumption that the connection is still there, still available, still emotionally waiting in the background. Even during silence, even during distance. There is often this unconscious belief. She'll still care. She understands me. She's not really gone. And honestly, that illusion protects him emotionally for a while. Because as long as she still feels emotionally reachable psychologically, he doesn't have to fully confront the loss. But when her energy changes genuinely, when she stops chasing, stops checking, stops emotionally reaching toward him, that's when reality lands. Not all at once. In moments. He notices she no longer watches his stories immediately. Notices her responses become calmer, shorter, less emotionally available, or maybe worse, peaceful. That peacefulness destroys him a little, because now her absence stops feeling like a temporary emotional standoff. It starts feeling permanent, and suddenly all the emotional avoidance that once felt protective begins collapsing inward. That's when some men finally understand the full weight of what they lost. Not abstractly, specifically, painfully specifically. Now he remembers everything differently. The nights she stayed patient while he withdrew emotionally. The moments she tried to communicate honestly while he shut down. The times she reached for connection while he treated vulnerability like pressure instead of love. And the painful part is, sometimes he understands all of this clearly while still doing absolutely nothing. That's the contradiction people struggle to understand. Clarity does not automatically create courage. Sometimes it creates paralysis. Because now reaching out carries emotional consequences. Now he has to face what his avoidance actually did. Now he risks hearing the pain in her voice. Or worse, he risks hearing nothing at all. That possibility terrifies people, especially emotionally avoidant men. Because underneath avoidance is often a deep sensitivity to rejection and shame. So now he's trapped between two painful realities. Silence hurts, but vulnerability feels dangerous. And honestly, this phase can become emotionally brutal internally. Because regret without action creates psychological torment. He starts replaying moments differently now. Memory becomes sharper after loss sometimes. Funny how the brain does that. During the relationship, he focused on pressure, fear, uncertainty, the emotional intensity. Now, he remembers softness, the way she looked at him when he was exhausted, the tiny ways she cared for him naturally, the emotional safety he kept trying to escape while simultaneously needing it. And once he sees it clearly, it becomes hard to unsee. I remember someone saying, "I thought she was asking for too much. Now I realize she was asking for consistency." That sentence carries so much quiet regret. Because emotionally avoidant men often reinterpret the relationship completely after distance becomes real. Things they once experienced as emotional pressure, they later recognize as intimacy. Things they once resisted, they later miss desperately. And unfortunately, emotional realization often matures slower than emotional damage. That's the tragedy. By the time he understands what the connection truly meant to him, she may already be emotionally exhausted, or worse, emotionally healed. That's a difficult thing for avoidant men to witness. Her healing. Because now there's no emotional tension left protecting him psychologically. No push-pull dynamic. No emotional pursuit. No reassurance that she's still emotionally orbiting him. Just distance. Real distance. And real distance forces self-confrontation. That's when the internal dialogue becomes brutal. You loved her. Then why did you act like that? I was scared. She was scared too. I know. You hurt her. I know. Then why didn't you just say what you felt? Because then it would have been real. That last part matters. Because for many emotionally avoidant men, emotional expression makes attachment feel dangerously real. As long as feelings remain partially unspoken, there's still psychological escape, still distance, still control. But honest vulnerability removes the illusion of emotional independence. And some men spend years unconsciously protecting that illusion until loneliness exposes it. That's another hidden truth here. Sometimes the loneliness arrives after the relationship, not during it. During the relationship, he was distracted by emotional activation, fear, overthinking, internal conflict. Afterward, just silence. And silence creates room for truth. Now, there's nobody buffering his emotional world anymore. Nobody softening his hard days. Nobody noticing subtle mood shifts. Nobody reaching toward him emotionally. And eventually, he realizes those things mattered more than his pride allowed him to admit. That realization can break people open internally, especially men who genuinely thought distance would make them feel freer. Instead, they feel emotionally haunted. Not dramatically, quietly, like reaching for the phone automatically during difficult moments before remembering there's no safe emotional place to land anymore. Or hearing good news and instinctively wanting to tell her first. Or lying awake thinking about the final version of her he saw before things ended emotionally. That image sticks sometimes, especially if she finally stopped trying. Because there's something deeply painful about realizing someone loved you consistently until they became too hurt to continue. That realization creates a kind of grief mixed with self-disappointment. Not just, I lost her. More like, I became someone she had to emotionally recover from. That awareness humbles people deeply, at least the emotionally honest ones. And honestly, some men do reach out during this phase. But even then, it's rarely clean. Not some perfect cinematic apology. Usually awkward, hesitant, emotionally clumsy. A late-night text rewritten 20 times. A random check-in disguised as casual conversation. A message that says, I've been thinking about you. Simple words carrying months of suppressed emotion underneath. And sometimes he never sends anything at all. That happens too. People imagine regret always leads to action. Not necessarily. Sometimes regret just lives inside someone quietly for years. Especially if shame becomes stronger than hope. Because now another terrifying possibility exists. What if she sees him clearly now? Not the composed version. Not the emotionally controlled version. The real version. The scared version. The avoidant version. The emotionally immature version that pushed away closeness because it mattered too much. That level of exposure feels unbearable to some men. So instead, they stay silent, even while loving her, even while missing her, even while knowing exactly what she meant to them. And honestly, I think that's one of the saddest truths about emotionally avoidant people. Sometimes they fully understand the value of the connection only after their fear has already damaged it beyond repair. Not because they lacked love, because they lack the emotional capacity to stay open while love was actually happening. And by the time emotional clarity finally arrives, they're left standing alone inside the consequences of all the feelings they spent so long trying not to feel. I think by the end of all this, the hardest thing to accept is something much less dramatic than people expect. Nut. He never cared. Nut. She imagined the connection. And honestly, not even. They were meant to be together. Sometimes the truth is quieter than that. More human. More uncomfortable. Sometimes people genuinely affect each other deeply and still fail each other emotionally. Not because the connection was fake. Because being emotionally impacted by someone and being emotionally capable of sustaining intimacy with them are two completely different things. That's the part people don't want to hear. Because we're taught that strong feelings should naturally create clarity. But real life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes strong feelings create fear, avoidance, confusion, control issues, emotional regression. Sometimes love doesn't soften people immediately. Sometimes it exposes all the places inside them that still don't know how to receive love safely. And honestly, I think a lot of men spend years confusing emotional control with emotional stability. They think, if I can suppress it, I'm handling it. But suppression isn't peace. Distance isn't understanding. Silence isn't healing. Eventually, the emotions just relocate somewhere quieter, into routine, into memory, into late-night thoughts nobody else hears. That's why some men continue thinking about someone long after the relationship becomes outwardly silent. Not because they're obsessed, not because they're spiritually trapped, because certain people alter your internal world in ways your nervous system remembers long after your behavior changes. And maybe that's what makes these connections so painful. There's rarely a clean villain. Sometimes she really did love him patiently. Sometimes he really did care deeply. And still, he pulled away. She got exhausted. Communication fractured. Fear took over where honesty should have existed. That happens more than people admit, especially in emotionally avoidant dynamics. I think one of the saddest realizations for emotionally guarded men is understanding that intentions do not erase impact. You can love someone and still destabilize them emotionally. You can miss someone and still leave them confused. You can care deeply and still fail to communicate in ways that create safety. That contradiction hurts because it forces emotional accountability beyond feelings. Not, did you love her? But, how did your fear behave around her love? That's a much harder question. And honestly, some men never fully face it. They keep rewriting the story instead. She wanted too much. The timing was wrong. It just got complicated. Maybe. But sometimes the truth is less elegant. Sometimes she got tired of trying to hold emotional connection with someone who kept emotionally stepping backward every time things became real. And sometimes he genuinely hated himself for that while it was happening. That's the part people rarely see. The private self-disappointment. The late-night awareness. The realization that he kept treating emotional safety like pressure because he didn't know how to relax inside intimacy. I think emotionally avoidant men often imagine vulnerability as losing themselves. Then, after the relationship ends, they realize avoidance made them lose the relationship anyway. That realization is brutal, especially because hindsight creates emotional clarity the nervous system couldn't access during the relationship itself. Now he sees the moments differently. The times she wasn't asking for perfection, just reassurance. The times she wasn't trying to trap him emotionally, just trying to feel close to him. The times she needed honesty while he responded with emotional ambiguity, because ambiguity felt safer than vulnerability. And honestly, sometimes he carries those realizations for years. Quietly, people assume emotional closure happens cleanly. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time people continue carrying fragments of each other long after communication stops. A sentence, a memory, a feeling, a specific version of themselves they only became around that person. That's another hidden grief people don't talk about enough. Sometimes he misses who he was with her too. The softer version, the emotionally open version, the version that laughed easier, slept better, felt calmer before fear complicated everything. And losing access to that version of himself hurts too. Especially if he realizes too late that she wasn't actually threatening his emotional stability. She was exposing how unstable it already was underneath the control. That realization changes people, or at least it can, if they're honest enough to sit with it. I think some men spend years running from emotional dependency without realizing healthy intimacy was never asking them to disappear as individuals. It was asking them to participate emotionally, to stay present while afraid, to communicate instead of retreat, to tolerate vulnerability long enough for trust to deepen. And honestly, many men simply were never taught how to do that. Not emotionally, not relationally. They learned achievement, control, performance, self-containment. But intimacy, real intimacy, that requires emotional tolerance. The ability to remain emotionally present without fleeing into silence every time attachment becomes visible. And if someone never learned that skill, love can feel terrifying, even when it's healthy. Especially when it's healthy. Because healthy love removes emotional hiding places. And once somebody truly sees you, you can no longer pretend your emotional patterns don't exist. That's why some men become colder precisely when the connection becomes safest. Not because safety feels bad, because safety removes the emotional armor they depended on psychologically. And without the armor, they feel exposed. Human, needy, scared, things many men were conditioned to suppress. So instead of saying, "I'm overwhelmed by how much I care," they say, "I just need space." And sometimes they believe the explanation themselves for a while, until silence teaches them otherwise. That's another painful truth. Distance often clarifies emotions that fear distorted. Not immediately, not romantically, slowly, through ordinary life, through missing someone during random moments, through realizing emotional peace mattered more than ego, through understanding that being loved consistently felt unfamiliar, not unsafe. And maybe that's what this entire story really comes down to. Not whether he loved her. Sometimes he absolutely did. The deeper question is whether he knew how to remain emotionally open while loving someone who genuinely reached his heart. Those are different abilities. And unfortunately, some people learn the difference only after loss. I think that's why certain connections linger internally for years. Not because they were perfect. Usually they weren't. Not because they were magical. Most of the time they were painfully human. Messy communication, bad timing, fear, immaturity, tenderness, avoidance, longing, silence, human. That's what makes it ache. And honestly, maybe the quiet truth nobody admits is this. Sometimes the person who runs from love is not running because they feel nothing. Sometimes they're running because they finally found something emotionally real enough to change them, and they had no idea how to stay open long enough to let it. So they leave. But internally, part of them never fully leaves the connection at all. Not in some dramatic destiny-driven way. More quietly than that. Like occasionally hearing her laugh in someone else's voice years later. Or still thinking about her during difficult nights without fully understanding why. Or randomly remembering the version of themselves that existed beside her. And feeling grief and gratitude at the exact same time. And maybe that's the final contradiction. Sometimes the man who ran away from the connection ends up carrying it silently for the rest of his life.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.